Do we feel all woven together? Yeah, it's a good feeling to know we're one, to know that the truth of our being is that we are one with each other. And it is a feeling of love. It's more than a feeling, it's a way of being. It's a way of being within ourselves and with each other. And it's unity. It's unity. And I think because we have a new member class coming up, I felt inspired today to talk about unity and what it means and what it's all about. And it's this community, it's us coming together, but there are some very profound truths and amazing ways of being that unity is about. Last week we talked about the Our Father in honor of Father's Day, or the Lord's Prayer. And we looked at the first lines, and we talked about the Aramaic language and its layers of meaning and how you can translate that prayer in a variety of ways, and you can go deeper and deeper. But essentially, when we're saying Our Father and we take into account the Aramaic layers of being, what we are saying is there is one source, and we turn to that source. There is one breath, the breath of God that breathes each and every one of us. Gary does not have a separate breath. We all share that same breath of God that moves through each and every one of us. So there is one breath, one people, one kingdom. Because the kingdom is not just within us, it is among us. The word in Aramaic for in is the same as the word for among. So when Jesus was saying the kingdom is within, he was also saying the kingdom is among. So it's not like one person gets to experience the kingdom and claim it as a personal possession. It is among us. And when we are truly in the kingdom, it's not just within, it's how we experience each other, what we share with each other. It's one vision, it's one creation. So this sense of oneness is profound just in that prayer that Jesus taught. And that oneness, that unity, is the very heart of what unity is about. And of course, whenever there's oneness, love is at the core of that. So it's not a matter of is love more basic or is this oneness? It's one and the same thing. In fact, it's not just unity, but in literature and in writings, it's been described as a sacred unity. It's that unity that we experience when we know and feel and come from that I am that is within each of us. You know, the story of Moses being up on the mountain and a burning bush speaks to him and says that it is the God of Abraham, the God of Moses' ancestors. And when Moses said, well, when you send me down, who am I to say is sending me? And God answered, I am that I am. And that I am lives within each and every one of us. And in knowing that and in experiencing it, we recognize and experience that the divine lives in and through us, that which we call God lives through us. And so sacred unity is a profound awareness of our oneness with God. And of course, unity as a movement holds several principles as our foundation, and This is our statement of faith, or a version of it. There is only one presence and one power in my life and in the universe. That statement affirms that sacred unity that is the truth of our being. How many people are on board with that? Okay. How many people are on board with that when that other guy is doing, you know those people? When, you know, those people are doing that stuff? Yeah? How many are on board in those moments? It's a little harder. The hands that were like this, now we're like. And there's a lot going on with those people these days, right? There's a lot that can sit heavy on our hearts. There's a lot that can stir us up and make us feel angry. And yet, if we really hold this, how is it that we are to experience those people? How are we supposed to hold them? Or is it one power, one presence, except for them? You know? So this is what this sacred unity is, a very beautiful idea. It uplifts, it fills our hearts, it takes us right to the core of what is most true, and it challenges us beyond belief. It does, because, you know, there's this thing, you know, and we get stirred up. I don't know about you, but sometimes my heart hurts and my gut aches, and sometimes I actually even want to throw up after I hear about what those people have. And it could be someone in our personal lives, someone in the news, someone across the ocean. We still, if we hold this, we have to have some way of stepping back enough from those emotions, from those reactions, and be able to see it through this truth. It doesn't tell us, though, that now that means we don't need to do anything, because sometimes the things that are being stirred up by those people are a call for action, right? And so we can still listen and be aware of what we are called to do, and still take the steps we need to take. But we can do it from this understanding that all of us share in that oneness. We all are an expression of the one presence and one power. We have wonderful role models. There's the Dalai Lama. You know, there was Nelson Mandela. There are people among us who have done that quietly in their own lives, moved from that gut-wrenching feeling to a greater power, to a greater understanding, to a deeper love, and still take the action that we are called upon to take. Does anybody want to pick an easier religion to go to? I think this is about as tough as it gets. And yet when we do it, it's one of the most profound gifts in the experience of our lives. We are no longer tossed about by the things that upset us, that hurt us, that make us angry, that scare us, that devastate us. We move through those things to a greater understanding. So that's sacred unity. And there were two amazing people who grabbed onto this truth. They didn't create this truth, but they grabbed onto it. They grabbed onto it in a way that they understood it to the core of their being, They had been spiritual seekers much of their lives. Their courtship involved letters about spirituality, you know. But each of them had a major health challenge. Myrtle Fillmore was raised pretty much being told that she would be sickly her whole life. Some say that her diagnosis was tuberculosis. I don't know if anyone knows for sure, but basically she was told that she would live a short and sickly life. Basically, don't expect too much. And Charles had a tuberculin leg or hip, and his one leg was much shorter than the other, and it caused him pain. And they had been seekers, and they'd been attending lectures and looking for a way to evolve and grow spiritually. And in one of those lectures, Myrtle Fillmore heard within her the words, "I am a child of God, and I do not inherit illness." And she really got it. You know those moments when even something you've known a long time all of a sudden hits deep, and this time you really got it? I think that must have been one of those moments for her. And she went home and she spent the next 2 years in prayer affirming this truth. She would go to her room and close the door and pray for 2 years. You know, I've heard people say, well, I called Silent Unity, we prayed and nothing happened, so I'm not going to do it again. 2 years, folks. 2 years. Every day, with dedication and with disapproval from Charles. He wrote about it, so I'm not making this up. He didn't like what she was doing. I mean, this is the turn of the 20th century. This man's wife is closing the door, keeping him out for an hour or two a night, every single night. He didn't like it. So without approval, without support, without apparent results in the beginning, she knew this so deeply that she just kept doing what she knew she had to do, and she healed. And Charles saw that and said, okay, now this got my attention. And he did the same, and he healed, and his leg grew longer. You know, the impossible is possible. And then they were on fire. The next thing, they had to share this with the world. They had to help other people know that too. And out of that came this unity movement, out of this deep understanding of what sacred unity means, what it means to be one with God. Out of a profound understanding came our movement. And they weren't the first. There is this man named Jesus that taught this stuff a couple thousand years ago. And they, of course, because they were spiritual seekers, this was part of their experience. But they came to know Jesus' teachings more deeply. Jesus taught, and this is quoted in the Gospel of John, "I and the Father are one." You could read it on a level and say, well, that's just true about Jesus. But I believe, and I think if you really pay attention, the evidence supports that Jesus was here to show us what we can be, who we are, and what is possible to us. So when he said, "I and the Father are one," he was saying that for us too, that is true. Each of us can say, "I and the Father are one." And of course, from last week, that means I am one with the source. I am one with the love. I am one with the power. I am one with the God of my being. The teachings of Jesus are profound. I mean, if you think of this, 2,000 years ago, the impact this man had, the crowds that would gather to come hear him speak. Sometimes his teachings have been reduced to a set of rules we should follow. Can you imagine if he stood up on a mountaintop and read a list of rules? Do this, do this, do this, and don't do this, don't do this, don't do. How many people would come to that? I mean, after the first, second time, instead the crowds kept growing and the people gathered. It seems by the thousands. So he had to be saying something deeper, more powerful, much more inspiring than just a list of rules. And so when we read his words, I think it is ours to go as deep as we can with what that means. And what does it mean in my life if I and the Father are one? Later on in the same gospel, he said, I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. Oh, God, that sounds so wonderful and warm, fuzzy right now. But it's in the living it. It's in the living it that we grow and we become, and we start seeing very, very amazing things. Not just Jesus, but other spiritual traditions, other teachers have brought the same message. There were teachers of Myrtle and Charles who reinforced these teachings. Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of our great philosophers, theologians, philosopher, I guess, in America. Emma Curtis Hopkins, who was given the title Teacher of Teachers. Mary Baker Eddy, who founded Christian Science. She ordained Myrtle and Charles, she taught them. But then they broke away because she was pretty set in her teachings, and Charles and Myrtle were always looking for opportunities to evolve in their understanding. And then Phineas Quimby is sometimes given the title the father of New Thought. He was an amazing healer. Everywhere he went, he would have miraculous healings, so they gave him this title. But I don't know if he deserves it, because Jesus was way ahead of him 2,000 years ago, and I believe Jesus was a profound New Thought teacher. So, and then Swami Vivekananda. How many people know of Swami Vivekananda? Good. It's because I talk about him a lot, right? Yeah. He came over in 1893 to the Parliament of Religions. That's pretty amazing. The turn of the 20th century. In Chicago, some wise people invited a Hindu teacher to come speak at the Parliament of Religions. For a long, long time, they would call it a Parliament of Religions, and only Christian denominations would show up. So this was a breakthrough to have someone from the East come. And he came and he spoke, and I have on very good authority that Myrtle and Charles were there. They got on fire with his teachings. They were distributing his literature, his pamphlets, recruiting people to follow him. And the way I know this is from a conversation or a series of conversations with the archivist at Unity Village for many years. And the archivist was the one who would sift through all the original paperwork, and he knew what was written in letters, things that weren't published. And of all the people I've ever met, I think he knows Unity history better than anyone. And I had the good fortune of being friends with him. And I had picked up a book in the library called Vedanta, and it was by Swami Vivekananda. And I'm reading this book, and it sounds like Unity. In fact, throughout the book, unity with a capital U, sacred unity, principles of oneness, the power of our minds to heal. This is unity. Even the practical spirituality. I'm there, wow, is he plagiarizing? So I said to my friend Eric, the archivist, I go, it sounds like unity. He said, yes, it does. And he told me the story of Myrtle and Charles listening to the Swami and getting on fire with this and trying to spread the teaching, so that when they began the movement, not only was it embedded powerfully with the teachings of Jesus and the New Thought understanding of it, but this heart-based understanding that we get from the East was also a part of it. Swami Vivekananda said all living beings are embodiment of the divine. In his book, I already mentioned unity, sacred unity, practical spirituality, almost every other page. And then, of course, Paramahansa Yogananda, also a teacher from the East. These are words of a chant that he wrote, and he wrote, "I am the bubble, make me the sea. Wave of the sea, dissolve in the sea." And there are more lyrics, but that's what I put up. And that image of a bubble, can you picture a bubble? How fragile, how vulnerable a bubble is? And that's how we feel sometimes. Separate, alone, small, fragile, like the slightest bump, and we might just dissolve, disappear. And in this chant, he goes, "I am the bubble, make me the sea." So I have this image of a bubble touching gently on the surface of the water and dissolving into the ocean. And that which was fragile, vulnerable, is now one with something so vast and so powerful and so magnificent. And that's what we do when we remember that sacred unity. We allow that small, separate bubble to dissolve in the truth of our oneness with God. And so for our time of meditation, we're going to do something a little bit different today. Narayan and Janet in the inspirations will sing this chant, and we will allow the chant to take you deep into your meditation. Imagine yourself with that chant dissolving into that oneness with God. And then at the end of the chant, we will have a few moments of silence, and I'll come up and I'll conclude it with a prayer.